the Buddha distinguished between sukha-paṭipadā, happy, easy Dhamma practice, and dukkha-paṭipadā, that is tough, quite difficult. And basically it depends on the strength of the defilements in the person. Someone like Ven Sāriputta, who due to his past practice in previous lives had very, very little anger, very, very little delusion, very little desire, passion, aversion, jealousy, and so on. Now for that kind of person, Dhamma practice is just very smooth and easy, and they can focus on a suitable meditation object, and then they will experience gladness and rapture, and the body very tranquil, and the mind is blissed out, and blissed mind unifies in Samādhi. Not quite sure how many we have of those. I'm not really belonging quite in that category either. And then there's dukkha-paṭipadā. Interestingly, even the second chief disciple of the Buddha, Venerable Moggallana, belonged to that. So this is that the defilements are relatively stronger. There's more desire, passion, aversion, delusion, jealousy, conceit, fear, and so on. And as a result, obviously, the Dhamma practice is more difficult. It's not so easy, it's not so smooth, it's not always just fun and rapture and bliss. And that manifests generally in life. Obviously, if we have stronger defilements, we tend to get ourselves into trouble. We may do stupid things which have painful results and so on. There's someone with very few defilements and then strong, ideally strong faculties on top of that. They will have often quite a smooth life where everything just flows very easily. I mean, the sukha-paṭipadā is obviously more pleasant. But on the other hand, if everything flows smoothly, people may live sometimes a little bit a mediocre life, or they're not really challenged and they may not get interested in Dhamma even. So as a consolation to all of those who struggle with an unruly mind, who are having difficulties in keeping precepts, and even more so in particular, you need very few defilements if you easily want to go into Samādhi. Now, most people nowadays struggle a lot with that, and there's a lot of unruly, wandering mind and all kinds of issues and all traumas and whatnot coming up. It's quite normal nowadays. Very, very few people like Ven Sāriputta around. However, it can have an advantage. Because if you want to investigate dukkha, having some dukkha is obviously a good starting point. And having some dukkha is usually also what puts us on the spiritual track. A typical response of experiencing a certain amount of dukkha is usually that we are starting to search spiritually. But usually when people come to the monastery and really want to see me, it's not because they will tell me, oh yeah, I'm so happy, Ajahn, everything is fine in my family, my job, my mind. I just want to tell you. Can't really remember when that happened the last time. Usually they come and someone has cancer, they lost their job, or the kid is going crazy, or they lost a close loved one. They come because of dukkha. So don't get despondent if there's lots of dukkha in your either life or in your formal meditation. Both are usually related anyhow. And if you have lots of dukkha in life, then there's usually also quite a bit of action and tension in meditation and vice versa. But that means that we can really strain or really apply our wisdom faculty now. And it's easier to see. And if someone is just very calm and peaceful in their meditation, feels good, but there may be very little incentive to really investigate, to use wisdom. They can sit in a long time and maybe not much progress, but it's just nice. On the other hand, if you're turning inside, all this challenging stuff is coming up, and if you keep going with that, you're kind of forced to practice wisdom and insight. And the Four Noble Truths, there's an exactly the right and the categories, the right pattern, the technique to apply there, are very suitable if you're that kind of person who encounters dukkha. It's very known that dukkha Vedana meditation, focusing on pain, if you don't change the posture for many hours, like Lumta Mahabuan talking about that quite a bit, he had major breakthroughs with that. It can be a very beneficial meditation object because the suffering is so strong that it's not easy to fall asleep while you meditate. It's not easy to just go into some fantasies. But even if you don't do deliberately dukkha Vedana meditation by not changing your posture so that you kind of deliberately arouse intense physical pain, and many of us have quite a bit of mental pain, isn't it? And the same thing applies. And you work with that as an excellent opportunity to investigate and apply wisdom. So how do we apply wisdom? We observe, we watch, and we see that suffering comes from craving. You can flip that around. The craving causes suffering. You can investigate in both directions. The causal relationships, they're obviously connected, and you can go in either direction. So once you have got the cause, you can look at what result is it creating. When you have the result, you look at the result, and you investigate where does it come from, what was the cause. In both directions they can be looked at, investigated, observed. And you can't do that too much. You can't see that too clearly, because we have a long conditioning in this society, in particular, from advertisements to growth ideology and happiness and so on. Through countless past lives, we have this conditioning that craving will make us happy as long as we can satisfy it. This is what the whole advertising industry is usually built on. What the whole modern capitalist market economy, growth economy, materialist economy is built on. And that is quite operative in the back of our mind. We may not even be consciously aware of that, but that is a very deep conditioning. Craving and satisfied, and then you get happy. And of course, that can be deceptive, because there is usually some happiness if you can satisfy the craving to start off with. But it comes with huge drawbacks. And it never gives real lasting satisfaction. And even if you go to the finest restaurant and have a perfect meal and spend $500 on one restaurant visit, it may feel very good, but where have you got with that? A few hours later and you're hungry again, and then you go to Subway, and you will be very disappointed when you get there in comparison. It's like that with every kind of sensual satisfaction. Every time we satisfy craving, it only starts burning more, and you need more and more to satisfy it. It's like a fire, and you can't convince a fire to stop burning by giving it enough fuel. The more fuel it gets, the more it will burn. So we have to watch that, we have to observe that. And if we ever fall into the trap that we follow craving and satisfy it, then we have to investigate and see the drawbacks, the adinava. We have to see how impermanent it is. And this is not separate between your formal meditation and your life. You can observe it either. You see it in life when you end up being really indulgent. Usually one gets into trouble. You can see it in your meditation. And when you indulge the fantasies, when you indulge the fear scenarios, when you indulge the old grudges, the peace of staying with a meditation object is destroyed, and agitation arises in the mind. Or even if it's not agitation, you're just following the fantasy, and it feels so good. And then after an hour of meditation, you have the big disappointment, the bell goes, and you realize you have actually increased defilements, you have wasted an hour. And also the other disappointment, the fantasy comes to an end. It's like going to the movies and a fantastic movie, but what does it do to you when you walk out of the movie? You're right back in life, and it has nothing has improved, no problem has been solved, and you have to cope with whatever real life is throwing at you. And then even more important to observe the other direction. Every little act of letting go of craving, every time we succeed to drop something, to let go, and then to notice contentment increasing. And it may not be outright bliss and rapture straight away, but at the very minimum, usually there's an increase in contentment. And contentment is something very valuable, very pleasant, very enjoyable. And again, both in daily life and in our meditation. This image comes up in the mind, that memory comes up in the mind, that fantasy comes up. I mean, you have been all meditating, you know what I'm talking about, no? This image, that fantasy, that thought. And it's actually usually not so difficult if one just stops it straight away. Once you're really into that fantasy, it gets more difficult, but if one drops it straight away, it's usually good, and then you settle down on the breath. And straight away in the contentment, sometimes even gladness, and that whole process, gladness, rapture, tranquility, bliss, Samādhi, may get triggered. But sometimes it's hard work. You have some little trauma coming up, some old grudge, some really deep hurt, some big loss comes up in the mind, and many times you can't let go. But you try, you investigate, you observe it as impermanent, you look at it, you develop the perception it's impermanent, it's not me, it's not mine, I don't own that. As best we can, and at some stage then we may have to do that many times, not so successfully, but at some stage the wisdom finally gets a handle, and then we can drop it, at least partially. And if it's a major thing, then we can drop it even partially, and you will immediately notice the tremendous feeling of lightness, tremendous diminishment of pain and misery. So we watch that. The one thing is learning the Four Noble Truths in the abstract. This is very valuable because that is the instruction manual, what we have to do. And if you do know the instructions, you can use a gadget. If it's a complicated machine, a complicated gadget without instructions, no one can't manage. Some are intuitive enough, and you can just fiddle around a little bit, and okay. But the mind is the most sophisticated and complicated gadget in the whole universe. And without any instruction manual, just trying to press the buttons here and there, and it will usually not lead to enlightenment. We need the instructions of the Buddha. So it's good to learn the instructions, to know them, but then of course we have to apply them to the gadget, which is our mind. And then we can see it happening, not yet to the full extent. If we practice, and it will take a long time usually until the letting go is sufficient that craving is abandoned to such an extent that the six sense spheres cease, at least for a moment, and Nibbana is seen. But any act of letting go that confirms that reconditioning process. And for the Sotapanna, and for someone who has seen the Dhamma, who has seen Nibbana, this is the reason that they are completely on the track. They are the real seekers, they are really in training, they are really on the path. Because that is such a strong confirmation that they have seen a very profound letting go and then Nibbana. And after that, your normal lifelong conditioning process will have been a kind of reset that is so powerful that now the default position is always to work for letting go. They may not be able to do it completely yet, for full Nibbana, but by now the default position is that, they will work for that. Before that, our default position is still to follow craving. And it requires this strong mindfulness. It requires that strong determination and persistence to always steer against. That's what the Buddha meant by going against the stream of craving. It's like paddling up against the stream. A natural, instinctive programming to follow desire, to satisfy it. And that has to be countered by wisely seeing that it will get us deeper into suffering. With anger, that is usually easier to see. Anger is usually immediately painful. The moment we indulge in anger, no one can notice it's kind of painful, unpleasant. But one needs stronger wisdom to see it with desire, passion, because it can feel very nice. So we have to really go in there and see the ardina, the danger, very clearly. We have to see that it's impermanent. We have to see that it cannot give lasting happiness. We have to show that our mind. We have to, even just thinking about it, there's also a form of meditating. Really thinking and showing that ardina to our mind, that danger. And the result of that is that we don't follow the craving anymore, that we go to the opposite of letting go of craving. Chago patinisako muti analayo, to abandon it, to throw it away, to relinquish it, to forfeit it. Freedom, release, liberation from craving. And then very important, whenever we succeed with that, even in small steps, to look at the result. This is usually even the acid test, the confirmation that we are not just doing mental gymnastics, not just thinking in the abstract, but if we truly see something as not me, not mine, impermanent, then we will let go to some extent. If we will let go to some extent, then there must be some form of diminishment of dukkha. There must be an increase of contentment, of ease. That can be very subtle, so it's important to see it, to have that mindfulness. That is what you train when you have the formal meditation, that you can see the little acts of letting go leading to small diminishment of dukkha, not yet a really big one. Often these things come up in the mind again and again, and the letting go is only little bit. But over time, repeatedly, it gets deeper and deeper. And even maybe more important, this reconditioning. Even if it's only a little bit of letting go and a little bit less dukkha, that is still sufficient to recondition us. You notice that as a track to go, letting go of craving, not following it. Okay, so for my little reflections on Four Noble Truths today on Asana Puja, my anumodana that there's quite a number of people here for the afternoon meditation. How many of you were here already at 8:30? Quite? Oh yeah, quite a number. Good, yeah. This is how you start the vasa. If you continue like that, you will recondition yourself to let go of craving more and more. Okay, 5 o'clock. Anumodana for having made it so many people through all the pain and suffering of a one-day retreat, and I'm sure that the more pain and suffering there was, the more wisdom and knowledge and insight and understanding you've got now. Let's share merits with all beings. The more you suffered, the more you have to share now, because the more merit in still making it through it all. Page 33.
Now let's chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble doubt. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled.